It was June 2019. At first glance, it looked like one of those tragic stories that happen every now and then inside the American prison system. A convicted killer, a compassionate release, and a man who supposedly couldn't bear the thought of going back behind bars. But within a few days, detectives would discover something that would completely change the case. Because the man everyone believed was dead was still alive, and someone else had died in his place. Back in 2014, a man named Jason Walker, then 31 years old, got into a violent fight outside a roadside bar in Knoxville. The argument escalated. Jason pulled out a handgun and shot another man. The victim died at the scene. Jason was arrested the very same night. 2 years later, after a lengthy trial, he was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. He was transferred to the Morgan County Correctional Complex, where he spent the next several years. According to prison staff, Jason wasn't considered a violent inmate anymore. He followed prison rules, worked inside the facility, rarely caused problems. Then, in June of 2019, everything changed. Jason's father passed away. His mother had already died years before. His father was the last immediate family member he had left. His attorney filed a request for compassionate temporary release, a parole, so Jason could attend the funeral and settle a few family matters. After receiving and reviewing the request, the court approved it. Jason would be released for 14 days. Parole under strict conditions. There was one rule he couldn't break. He had to report back to prison no later than 5 p.m. on June 29, 2019, not a minute later. For the first few days, everything appeared normal. Neighbors saw Jason taking care of funeral arrangements. He visited the cemetery, met with relatives, handled paperwork. Nothing unusual, nothing suspicious. In fact, several people later told investigators he looked quieter than usual. He barely smiled. He seemed distracted. But nobody thought much of it. Losing your father, especially while serving a life sentence, would break almost anyone. As the days passed, the deadline got closer. June 29th, the final day of Jason's release. But that evening, he was supposed to be back inside prison. Instead, at around 5:20 that morning, 911 dispatchers in Knoxville received multiple emergency calls. A house was on fire. Flames were pouring through the upstairs windows. Neighbors said they had seen thick black smoke before sunrise. Firefighters arrived within minutes. They forced their way inside and eventually brought the fire under control. When they searched the second floor, They found a badly burned body. The victim was almost impossible to identify. The face had been severely damaged by the fire. Since Jason lived alone, everyone assumed the body belonged to him. Local detectives were called to the scene. At first, it looked like a straightforward suicide. Then, investigators discovered something that seemed to confirm it. On a desk inside another room, they found a handwritten note. It read, "I can't go back. Prison has taken everything from me. My parents are gone. I have nothing left outside those walls. I would rather die here than spend the rest of my life behind bars. No one else is responsible for my death." The note appeared genuine. Detectives collected several old documents from the house: bank forms, medical papers, personal letters. A handwriting expert later concluded the suicide note had indeed been written by Jason Walker. Everything pointed towards one conclusion: Jason had killed himself. Hours before he was supposed to return to prison, later that afternoon, officials at Morgan County Correctional Complex were informed Jason never came back. Instead, prison administrators were told that he had apparently taken his own life. Legally, his prison sentence ended that day. The case looked finished. Simple, tragic, closed. Or so everyone believed. Because 2 days later, the medical examiner's office released the autopsy report, and one sentence inside that report would turn the entire investigation upside down. The medical examiner's report reached the Knoxville Sheriff's Office 2 days later. Detective Michael Carter read the first page, then suddenly stopped. He read the cause of death again. It didn't say death caused by fire. Instead, it read cause of death, homicide by manual strangulation. The victim hadn't died in the fire. He had been strangled long before the flames ever started. The fire had also been used to destroy the evidence. The detective immediately picked up the phone. Within an hour, the case was no longer classified as a suicide. It had officially become a homicide investigation. The detectives returned to the burned house. This time, they weren't looking for answers. They were looking for mistakes. Crime scene photographs were spread across a conference table. Every investigator carefully studied each image. For nearly 2 hours, nothing stood out. Then, Detective Carter noticed something strange. The victim's legs, they were perfectly straight, almost touching each other. It looked unnatural. People trapped in a fire don't stay perfectly still. They panic, they fight, they run. Their bodies usually end up in awkward positions. This victim hadn't moved at all. almost as if he had already been dead before the fire ever started. The detective zoomed in on another photograph, the burn pattern. That looked strange too. Most of the fire damage was concentrated on the victim's face, upper chest, and shoulders. The lower half of the body was barely burned. It didn't look like a house fire. It looked targeted. Someone had intentionally poured gasoline over the upper body, trying to destroy the victim's face. Someone wanted investigators to believe the dead man was Jason Walker. Detectives immediately reopened Jason's entire background: prison behavior, visitors, financial records, phone activity during parole, everything. Nothing unusual appeared. Jason hadn't contacted any known criminals. He hadn't withdrawn large amounts of money. He hadn't tried crossing the state lines. It looked ordinary until detectives examined his phone records more closely. Most calls were exactly what they expected: relatives, funeral home, a local attorney. Then one number caught Detective Carter's attention. Jason had called the same person over 30 times during his 14th day release. Sometimes for 2 minutes, sometimes for 20, sometimes late at night, sometimes early in the morning. And as I just told, on the 14th day, the last day, that day also he contacted a number. Whoever this person was, they had become Jason's closest contact. The phone number belonged to a man named Tyler Brooks. The name meant nothing to investigators, so they dug deeper. Tyler had once rented a room inside Jason's old house. They would known each other for years, but Tyler had moved away several months earlier. His last known address was in Arkansas. Detectives immediately drove there. Finding Tyler wasn't difficult. He worked at a warehouse outside Little Rock. When deputies approached him, he looked genuinely surprised. He had no idea Jason was supposedly dead. At first, Tyler insisted he knew nothing. He admitted Jason had called him many times, but claimed they had only talked about prison, family, and how miserable Jason felt. The detectives weren't convinced. Hours passed. Questions became more specific. Tyler's story started changing. He became nervous. His hands began shaking. Finally, he looked down at the floor and whispered, "I didn't kill anybody." The room went completely silent. Detective Carter leaned forward. "We never said you did." Tyler realized he had just exposed himself. A few minutes later, he began telling detectives everything. According to Tyler, about 4 days before Jason's parole ended, Jason completely changed. He became obsessed with one idea: "I can't go back." He repeated it over and over. Jason believed Once he returned to prison, he would probably never experience freedom again. His parents were both gone. There would be no future compassionate releases, no second chance, no life outside prison. Then Jason revealed a plan so disturbing. Tyler refused immediately. Jason wanted the world to believe he had died. Tyler stared at him in disbelief and said, "How?" Jason answered with just one sentence: "We need another body." Tyler said he panicked. He refused. He wanted nothing to do with murder. Then Jason offered him $50,000 in cash, half upfront, the other half after everything was over. Tyler admitted he took the money, and from that moment on, they started looking for someone who could disappear without raising immediate suspicion. On the second night of June 28th, just hours before Jason was supposed to return to prison, the two men drove around Knoxville searching for the perfect victim. They weren't looking for someone they knew. They weren't looking for revenge. They were simply looking for someone who looked enough like Jason to fool the investigators, and eventually they found him. A young man standing alone at a gas station. The young man they chose was 26 years old, Brandon Hayes. He worked at a nearby auto repair shop and had stopped at the gas station after finishing a late shift. He worked at a nearby auto repair shop and he had stopped at the gas station after finishing a late shift. Jason struck up a casual conversation. Within minutes, the three of them were laughing. Jason even introduced Tyler as his cousin. Nothing about the interaction seemed suspicious. A little later, Jason suggested they continue the conversation at his house. "Come on," he smiled. "I've got a bottle of whiskey. Let's celebrate making a new friend." Brandon hesitated and eventually agreed. It would be the biggest mistake of his life. The three men spent the next couple of hours drinking. Jason kept filling Brandon's glass. Every time it became empty, he poured another drink. Tyler later admitted that Jason wanted Brandon heavily intoxicated, so he wouldn't be able to fight back. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, Brandon could rarely stay conscious. He slumped into a chair, his speech completely slurred. Jason quietly looked at Tyler. Without saying a word, the two men understood each other. Jason walked behind Brandon, wrapped both hands around his neck, and squeezed. Brandon fought for only a few seconds. His weakened body couldn't resist. Within moments, he stopped moving. The room fell silent. Jason wasn't finished. He carried Brandon's body into an upstairs bedroom. Then he carefully changed the victim's clothes. putting him into clothing similar to his own. Next, he placed Jason's personal belongings nearby. Wallet, watch, house keys, everything investigators would expect to find. Finally, he wrote one last page, a suicide note. He already knew investigators would compare the handwriting, so he wrote it himself, slowly, carefully, making sure every word looked believable. Just before sunrise, Jason drove to a nearby gas station. He filled a portable full container with gasoline. Returning home, he poured the gasoline over Brenda's upper body, especially around the face and shoulder. His goal wasn't to burn the entire body. His goal was to destroy the victim's identity. Jason lit a match, dropped it, and walked away. Within minutes, the house was engulfed in flames. As neighbors called 911, Jason quietly disappeared, leaving everyone to believe he had died inside. Detectives now knew exactly what had happened. Only one question remained. Where was Jason Walker? Tyler had no idea. And he only remembered one conversation. Jason had mentioned heading somewhere in the southern United States where nobody knew him. He also told Tyler something else. If I ever call again, hit phone from my phone. Before leaving, the two men exchanged old prepaid SIM cards. Jason planned to contact Tyler someday using that number. It was the only lead detectives had, so they waited. Days passed, nothing. Then, late one evening, Tyler's phone suddenly rang. The number was unfamiliar, but Tyler immediately recognized the voice. It was Jason. Unaware that Tyler was sitting inside a interview room, surrounded by detectives, and Jason sounded relaxed, almost relieved. No one suspects anything. He said, I'm safe. Detectives silently recorded every word. Then, Jason finally revealed the one thing they desperately needed. He said, I'm in Nashville within hours. A joint task force from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, the U.S. Marshals Service, and the Metro Nashville Police Department was assembled. Instead of rushing in immediately, they decided to let Jason believe everything was normal. Following instructions from detectives, Tyler called Jason back. He told him he had found someone willing to help him and get fake documents, a place to stay, and cash. Jason agreed to meet. The location: a small diner on the outskirts of Nashville. The next afternoon, plainclothes officers filled the area. Some posed as customers, others waited inside the parked vehicles. No uniforms, no flashing lights. Jason couldn't suspect a thing. Exactly at 2:15 p.m., No uniforms, no flashing lights. Jason couldn't suspect a thing. Exactly at 2:15 p.m., a grey pickup truck pulled into the parking lot. The driver stepped out wearing sunglasses, a baseball cap, and a trimmed beard. He looked around carefully, then walked toward the diner. Tyler waved. Jason smiled and started walking over. He never noticed the two men approaching from behind. Jason Walker, he turned. Before he could react, federal agents pinned him to the ground. The man who had spent several days several days pretending to be dead was finally back in handcuffs. During interrogation, Jason confessed 5 years inside the prison had destroyed him mentally. He couldn't accept spending the rest of his life behind bars. He believed faking his death was the only way to escape forever. His desperate plan left an innocent man dead. Brendan Hayes had never met Jason before that night. He wasn't involved in crime. He wasn't Jason's enemy. He simply happened to be he wasn't involved in crime. He wasn't Jason's enemy. He simply happened to be standing alone at the wrong gas station on the wrong night. Jason was charged with first-degree murder, arson, abuse of a corpse, evidence tampering, criminal conspiracy, escape from lawful custody. Tyler Brooks accepted a plea agreement and testified against Jason during trial. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Jason Walker was found guilty on every count. His original life sentence remained in place, and the court added multiple consecutive sentences, ensuring he would never again leave prison alive. Jason believed that by killing a stranger, he could erase his own identity. Instead, he guaranteed that his name would be remembered forever, not as a man who escaped justice, but as a murderer who committed an even darker crime while trying to outrun it. So that was all from my end, and if you liked the story, please hit the like button, and also do subscribe for more such real, haunted and crime stories. Good night.